Vestas launched a sustainability strategy, sustainability in everything we do. The strategy consists of 4 main pillars: to become carbon neutral by 2030, to produce zero waste turbines by 2040, and to be social responsible, and to lead the transition towards a world powered by renewable energy. So now let's have a look at those 4 pillars in more detail. Next slide, please. Thanks. Talking about our own operations, so that's scope 1 and 2 emissions. As Vestas, we are committed to reducing emissions from our own operations by 55% by 2025 and 100% by 2030 without the use of carbon offsets. And we remain committed to this target despite the inclusion of the offshore business in our activities. In August 2020, the carbon neutrality target for our own operations was validated by the Science Based Targets initiative and confirmed that it is in line with the efforts required to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperature level. To give you some insights into our CO2 reduction initiatives, we continue to source 100% of own electricity from renewable sources. We are electrifying our fleet of benefit cars and constantly putting more and more EVs and sustainably fueled service cars into our fleet. We continue to modernize our factory heating systems, and we have also begun investing alternative fuels for our offshore vessels. And right now we are doing a trial with the customer around a vessel powered by hydrogen. Next slide, please. Yes. So now let's talk about the scope 3 emissions. So that's the emission from our supply chain. By 2030, we will reduce carbon emissions from our supply chain by 45% per megawatt hour delivered to the market. We do this by working very closely with our strategic suppliers. We support our suppliers in developing strategies to measure and reduce their emissions. We have outlined expectations and very ambitious targets for waste and carbon emissions, carbon emission reductions for both our own suppliers and their suppliers. We introduced a new digital platform that receives information from our suppliers and includes our own data to calculate CO2 and waste. And we have increased our focus on accelerating the decarbonization of steel production. Last but not least, we are looking into redesigning our turbines with less carbon-intensive material. Next, yes, thank you. So let us now have a look at our goal to produce zero-waste turbine by 2040. In last year, we launched the first holistic circularity roadmap in the renewable energy industry. It is based on 3 key areas, as you can see: design, operations, and material recovery. Our circularity roadmap will help us to reduce our waste across the value chain without the ambition of producing zero waste turbines by 2040. The goal is to have fully recyclable blades by 2030, both from a technical and from a commercial perspective, and I'm very sure that we can be faster than that. As part of the Decom Blades Consortium, we're exploring ways to scale up existing recycling technologies for legacy blades. And we are already offering blade recycling solutions in some regions, for example, the US. Furthermore, through the launch of the CTEC project, we are committing to create the first truly circular blade in the wind industry. So that's very exciting. But we will not only look at blades, certainly. We will look at the full turbine structure. Our ambition is to redesign the turbine or develop new ways so that every turbine component will be recyclable by 2040. Through refurbishment, we can reuse up to 70% of old component material, and this has a huge positive impact on our CO2 balance. The major components of Vestas turbines are already largely refurbished and reutilized. However, we commit to achieve 55% refurbished component utilization, mainly by creating new repair loops for minor components. As I said before, we work very closely with our suppliers to also increase waste in our supply chain. We are committing to reduce the amount of manufacturing waste going to landfill to less than 1% and optimize the recyclability of our waste. Next slide, please. Yes. At Vestas, you probably all know, we operate under the principle of safety first, no matter what. Over the last decade and a half, we have developed a comprehensive toolkit of safety initiatives and have mapped the effectiveness of these tools to demonstrate a positive correlation to safety performance. Now, we are committed to developing predictive capabilities for all health and safety risks and have created an extensive global monitoring program to identify the safety maturity status of individual departments and regions. This program allows us to define appropriate areas in which to drive safety performance and to achieve our long-term safety targets. Next slide, please. Yes. It is our responsibility to conduct business within integrity wherever in the world we operate. Our CSR approach is embedded into our business process and implemented globally. We work with 3 pillars to earn social license to operate, which is responsibility, inclusiveness, and also leadership. So in the part of responsibility, it's about respecting human rights by strengthening human rights governance and management. In the part of inclusiveness, it's investing in local communities by creating long-term value through community engagement. And in the part of leadership, that's partnering with stakeholders to ensuring the integrity of human rights in the energy transition. Next slide, please. To sum up, so here are some of the sustainability highlights from last year. Our installed fleet displaced more than 500 million tons of CO2 in 2021 alone. We reduced emissions from our own operations by 11%. We recycled our first 285 blades, as I said, mainly in the US, and started to design the first truly circular blade. We continue with our close collaboration and expectation towards our suppliers. We continue to focus on safety and bring down the total recordable injury rate. And I haven't touched upon this topic in my presentation. We launched an updated code of conduct, employee code of conduct, and also a supplier code of conduct. So I hope this very short presentation provided you with some insights about what Vestas is doing as a key player in the wind industry when it comes to sustainability. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was great. That touched on a lot of the things we're going to be discussing today. And I realised in the midst of my excitement to start this panel, I didn't actually introduce myself. So my name is Rashmi Ladwa from the Global Wind Energy Council, and I'm working as a policy officer. So I'm hoping I didn't introduce myself, otherwise you've been introduced twice now. And on that note, I would be delighted to now welcome our other panellists. So if I would like to welcome to the stage Otto Lundman, the founder and CEO of Modvion, followed by Giovanni Tula, Head of Sustainability at NL Green Power, and last but not least, Maximilian Schneipering, Team Leader in Government and Sustainability from Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. So a big welcome to you all, and I'm coming to join you now. Great. So, I mean, Sarah really did touch a lot of the topics really well and covered them in a lot of depth. So it's really great to hear what Vestas is doing. And apologies if you have to repeat some of the things again. But I think it'd be really great. And what we're going to do is we've got a series of questions we're going to ask. And we're going to ask the panelists to just make like a 2-minute intervention to state what their organisation is doing and their position on this. And so one of the topics that Sarah touched in her presentation was on the topic of circular economy. Now, for us, this is very much a buzzword. We hear it a lot, and it's definitely picked up pace in the last few years. And I'm sure many of you have heard the statistic that roughly 90% of a wind turbine's mass is recyclable due to most of it being made from steel as a component. And so I was wanted to put to the panel, what can the industry maybe do, alluding to specific actors, to ensure more circularity within the life cycle of a wind turbine? So this can give light to specific components of the turbine or within specific components of the supply chain. So Maximilian, it'd be great to start with you first.
Super, thanks a lot. Yeah, if we talk about circularity, then we usually view it from two perspectives. So on the one side, we are looking to make our turbines fully recyclable. And here it's really important, and we have some very good experiences now at hand with the introduction of the recyclable blade, and we are continuing this way to make our full turbine recyclable ultimately. So that at the end, our turbines become also the feedstock for the future turbines that we want to build. Now, on another page, we are also looking then on the supply chain side, where we are focusing basically on working closely together with our suppliers to increase also the recycled content used in our products. And this is working already quite well for steel, and we are currently bringing this into further areas to also take down circularity really from downstream to upstream supply chains from a holistic point of view.
That's great. Tulo, it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, we are basically utility. We are at the end of the value chain of the supply chain, because we are those that operate the plants, the power plants. So from our perspective, we see that on the one end, a wind turbine is an equipment that is fully recyclable, or is recyclable for more than 80% of the materials that stay in the turbine. But the problem is the rest of the 20%. And that I'm very glad of the programs of Vestas and also Siemens are in place for closing this gap with the blades that are probably today the most difficult part of the turbines to be recycled. And another area where we are investing to improve the recyclability is the concrete or the foundations, because it's an area where concrete can be recycled, but we definitely need to improve on that in order to make it more competitive. And we are also working with the suppliers in order to, let's say, incentivize them to increase the circular input. I mean, the quantity of raw materials used for manufacturing the turbines, which is another area of very, very important in order to improve the circular turbines. And another thing that is very important is to design, to approach circular design. I mean, it's very important if you want to really extract more value from the turbine with the circularity, to start thinking to the turbine when we design it in a way in which we take into account also the end of life of the turbine. That's going to make the life easier for those that have to recycle, reuse the materials within the turbine. So basically, that's our view as a utility.
That's great. Otto?
Yeah, we very much agree. You need to include circularity from the start. And at Modvion, where we developed the next generation of towers from wooden material, we include this, of course. So when the tower has been standing for its lifetime, we can take down the tower and use the same fibers. This laminated veneer lumber can be used in a static application, such as a few-story building, for an additional 75 years, and then go into additional streams for an additional 150 years to really use these carbon fibers as long as possible. Sometimes we refer to our towers as just a storage for building material. So circularity has to be there from the start.
Absolutely. And any final remarks from you, Sarah?
Yeah, a lot has been said. So yes, of course, it is very important to think about the end at the beginning. So that's I think where we can all agree with this. But then a second thought on this is also to make it as easy as possible in the end. So if you have forgotten to think about it before or anything else. So when you were asking for different for industry players, how they can play a role, this can also be an opening up different recycling routes. So different industries where, for example, the cement industry, or where the blade is being scrapped and then used for it within the cement industry. When these kind of industry which at the beginning didn't have anything to do with the wind industry, come up and open up different recycling routes and make it easy, not just for us as players in the wind industry, but for everybody in the end, then circularity really works. Or at least opens this path also, or recyclability really works, not necessarily circularity, but recyclability really works. So make it as easy as possible in the end, but also think about it straight from the beginning.
Absolutely. I think one thing I have to commend the wind energy industry of is being creative when it comes to looking at the circularity of wind turbines and in ensuring that, you know, their uses go beyond just their time functioning as wind turbines. I'm sure some of you may have seen, but some of you may also not have seen, pictures of a wind blade being repurposed as a children's playground. I thought that was quite creative. And I think the examples you mentioned were much more technical, but I have no doubt that the wind energy industry will lead the way in doing so. And another thing, Sarah, you touched on in your presentation was Scope 3 emissions, as well as Scope 1 and 2. But I wanted to zoom in on Scope 3 emissions. And so I read an article recently where the Carbon Trust put out a great briefing document on emphasising the need for organisations to measure their Scope 3 emissions. So zooming in on this aspect and looking at the wind industry, where would we consider our emission hotspots to be, and which part of the supply chain do you say these hotspots exist? And I think we'll start with Giovanni this time, so we don't pick on just one person.
I think Scope 3 is really important. We as a utility, we have committed to become net zero by 2040. I mean, we brought 10 years ahead the commitment. Net zero, as Westas was highlighting the keynote speech, without any offsetting of emissions, which is a real challenge for us. And looking at the supply chain, we see that for the wind industry, steel, concrete, aluminum, probably are some other metals are the key emitters of CO2, and are the sectors that you know, they have the great challenges in front of them in order to decarbonize the raw materials or the materials that supply the manufacturers. Because on the one hand, the good news is that most of them rely on electricity in their production processes. That means that the more the wind industry will inject energy, green energy into the network, the less CO2 emission they will release. But on the other end, they have also some challenges in their own processes, because the emissions from their own processes, in order to cut those emissions, to decarbonize, they rely today in technologies that do not exist, or they are not fully mature now. So they are betting for the future what will be the net zero for them, so for steel, concrete, and so on. So our role as an utility, as an industry of wind, in my view, is to push the suppliers of those materials and to incentivize and to make them feeling that we care about the net zero, and to invest in innovation. They have to invest in order to find solutions for decarbonize their own processes, as well as we are doing for decarbonize the energy mix.
Absolutely. Otto?
Yeah, so for us it seems obvious to start with the largest component and to switch from emission-intensive materials such as steel and concrete into renewable materials. Renewables should be built with renewables, right? Yeah, so this is key.
Great, that's great. No pressure to keep it to 2 minutes. I know obviously in some of the cases, these questions, when one person says it, they pretty much say what the whole panel is thinking. So that's absolutely fine. And Sarah, any final remarks on that?
Yeah. So it's definitely steel and iron. So that makes up for us as producers, manufacturers of wind turbines. So that's key. So we work very closely together with you guys, of course. We invent in different new technologies, such as, well, not inventing, you guys invent, but we work together then on replacing steel in the turbines, now with the towers. But also, Vestas joined the First Mover Coalition, for example, so to invent also, or to decarbonize the steel production. That's important. So it's also a shift in the whole industry, in the whole steel industry. It's not just to avoid it, but also to try to, navigate it a little bit towards a better. It's not easy. It's an old and very intense industry, but we're trying.
Absolutely. And final remarks from you, Maximilian? Oh,
I could add in a little bit
course,
there.
yeah.
We all know green steel is developing. It's very, very interesting. But for starting out, it will go to consumer products like cars, where there's not so much of it and there's lots of willingness to pay for the extra cost of green steel. In a wind power tower, for example, there's just so much mass. So it's a much better choice to replace it. And wood not only has 90% less emissions in producing a tower compared to steel, it's also a carbon sink. Wood has sequestered carbon from the atmosphere, and that sink can then offset other components which will be harder to abate in the transition.
absolutely. Thank you for making that.
Yeah, we took our bill of materials and reviewed all the different products in there. And it was not a super nice task because there are several thousands of products in the bill of material from a wind turbine. But we identified that with less than 50 products, you can address more than 80% of the wind turbine's carbon footprint. And it's really, for us, important to work on these high impact products together with the whole value chain at the end. Because working here together with suppliers to find creative solutions to provide green alternative products at the end will allow our customers then also to customize supply chains later on for maybe a low carbon supply chain compared to a low cost supply chain. And this is why we heavily focus on these high impact products. And when we talk about them, we mentioned a lot the steel for the tower or the tower itself, which makes up to 40% of the impact of a wind turbine. Another 20% roughly are coming from the blades, where we see the fibers and the resins. The production of fibers and resin comes with big carbon intensities, so that's also something we need to closely work on. And then it's getting a little bit more complex, because then we're moving up to the nacelle, and in the nacelle we have many different parts. But again, also the large steel parts are there of focus, the magnets also as well, where we see the rare earths with big impacts. Those are components for us to work together across the supply chain to decarbonize.
Absolutely. I think the general consensus that I've got from this round of questions is that as the wind energy industry, we're not doing too badly. I mean, we're not the worst. We have some really good practices amongst us, and I feel like this kind of puts us on a platform above maybe some other technologies, how dare I say it. And I think if that's the case, we should absolutely be at the front of this conversation and at the front leading other renewable sectors through these challenges. And so the next question I want to put to you is, what is one best practice that you would say needs to be championed and replicated in other sectors and other renewable energy industries from your perspective or from your organisation? What do you think is the one advice you would give to help drive other sectors forward? And we'll start with Otto this time.
I think it's really important, the work that is being done at the corporations of my fellow panelists here. The big players in the industry showing the way, leading, daring to innovate, daring to use new materials, new components, and that is really important. As a small company, we meet, of course, a lot of skepticism.
Yeah.
And then it's really important to be working with the larger players that can really make this paradigm shift happen together with us.
Great, thank you. Sarah?
It can actually be really easy just doing it.
Yeah.
And that's easily said, but that's what it is. So it is a mindset. This mindset needs to go through the whole company. It needs to go from top to down up again. And I guess we can all agree that most, or if not all, of our employees working in the renewable energy do that for a purpose. So there is a mindset within all of our employees. They want to they want to push it forward. They want to combat the climate crisis. They really want to do it. So let's just do it. Let's not combat, or let's not discuss, and let's not. Of course, it's about planning, it's about innovation, it's about risks in some parts. But in the end, it comes down to, yeah, let's take that risk and let's do it. And sometimes you fail, that's part of the game. But then let's do it again and try it again. And if we don't all try really hard, we will never succeed. But we don't have much time, so we really need to do. So it's about doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I really like that intervention, actually. I really like that comment that it's a mindset thing, because sometimes people can be accused of saying that, mindset isn't important. And it really is. And I think that's been echoed this week here at the conference. The passion that everyone has for challenging some of the most difficult challenges that there are out there at the moment that are facing all of us. And also as a community, as a renewable energy and even just smaller wind energy community, you have to be extremely resilient. So I think that is all to do with mindset, and I'm really glad you raised that point. And we're coming back around to this side. Maximilian, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
No, exactly. I think sustainability has become a really broad topic, covering many, many aspects. And I couldn't agree more. For us, it's really time to take actions now. And to take actions, we need to measure sustainability, we need to define targets, we need to develop strategies and take these actions now, because that's really urgently needed.
Great.
Well, to conclude, I mean, this question, these answers, I cannot agree more than you all. I think that it's a matter to take actions, because we know that the wind industry is performing relatively well, better than other sectors. But it's not enough. It won't be enough, because we see that the stakeholders' expectation is rising every single day. We receive questions that 1 year ago, we didn't imagine. So it's very, very important to take action. It's very important to work together. I mean, an example of a good result was with Wind Europe, for instance, when we developed the framework for assessing sustainability with the self-assessment questionnaire. That's just one step toward the ultimate goal, that is a full traceability of the supply chain, because if we don't know where the components of the material are coming from, how can we set targets or or implement action plans? That's very important. In a space where we are working very, very well, I would say, and it's very interesting, is the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy, which is an alliance of manufacturers, utilities, NGOs, and where GWEC is also a member, and one of the founding members is giving a great support. And we are working now for setting, let's say, or shaping the future of our industry. I mean, or at least the members that are part of this alliance, in terms of circularity, human rights, which is another topic. It's affecting more solar, but it can be also relevant. It can become relevant also for wind, and also for the net zero, of course. I mean, I think that the example like the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy are very, very useful. And again, I invite you, anyone that wants to join the alliance, just to drop me an email. That's just advertising space moment, okay?
Please do. No, that's great. That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned solar as well, because obviously we can't, I mean, it's been great talking about wind all week, but there are other segments of this bigger picture and this bigger part of the problem. And collaboration is absolutely key, and hence why I thought it was really important to ask you how we can help others as well, given that we've basically proclaimed to be the best, we've been the best at sustainable practices. But there's one last question I want to finish off with before we hand over to the audience for any questions. And that is, obviously, within your organisations, you are either part of the dedicated sustainability teams or the head of sustainability departments. And I thought it would be really interesting to ask for specific examples or projects or specific tasks that fall under the remit of your work that people may not assume would be part of your work. So is there any specific projects you think would be interesting for people to know about that fall under your frame of work of sustainability? And I believe Sarah should start first.
Yes. I think you were saying it, Maximilian, before. Sustainability is such a broad topic. And of course, that doesn't stop inside an organization. So there it's also super broad. And you can probably ask 10 employees at Vestas what they do when it comes to sustainability, and you will get 10 different answers. That's how it is. And that's good, I think, because we do have specialists in all different departments. And there, that makes it yeah, not so easy sometimes to provide the big picture, because we're constantly working in a matrix structure. So yes, like myself, I'm working in the global sustainability department, but we have so many dotted lines all over the company in different areas and different departments. If we talk about waste, if we talk about the factories, for example, that's something totally different than the sustainability report than my colleague in my department, for example, is doing. If we talk about our colleagues in QHSE, they do totally different things than our other colleagues in the supply chain. So it's, I don't know where to start.
Yeah,
it's a really broad field, and there are probably many things that I would have also not discovered in with investors what somebody is doing. So.
But I think it's important just emphasising that it is broad.
It is broad, and it touches
not narrow.
upon so many things. Yes.
Hence why I really wanted to ask this question, to try and extrapolate some of the answers or some of the types of things that you do, because it's not an easy job by any means, and it is broad, and I think it's important for everyone to understand the scope of your work. And so, Maximilian, great to hear from you too.
Super, yeah. No, I think well said already. When I started like 10 years ago in the field of sustainability, it was a little bit like only being a well-educated taxi driver, but this topic has changed heavily over the years. It has become one of the key value drivers now for organizations. And it's really great to see that. But with increased focus, you also see a lot of increased responsibilities across the different teams now. So for sustainability teams, it means increased focus with regards to the management of our suppliers, where we need to drive decarbonization. You mentioned due diligence as well, and also sustainability innovation. For sustainability teams, this also means an increased focus on our own operations, managing our footprints, our environmental and social footprints. And it also means increased responsibility with regards to customer-facing activities to make transparent to you what are our supply chain networks looking like, what are our footprints looking like, so that sustainability also for you becomes a decisive factor in your decision criteria at the end. And that's something where this topic became really complex also, and I can continue now here and don't have to become a taxi driver.
Oh, it's a real success story.
Great.
It'd be great to hear from you, Giovanni.
It's a long journey. Yeah, actually, it has changed a lot. At least I see that sustainability in the old times was philanthropy or related, or mainly the most advanced. We're talking about CSR, corporate social responsibility. And then we went through the creating shared value concept. I mean, not only just giving back something to the community, but working together in order to create value and to share the value that the project brings to the territories. And now it's something even more, because we see that sustainability has became part of the strategy of the company. I mean, in our case, when we decided basically to get rid of the fossil fuels and to commit in the net zero, this opened a broader opportunity of creating value for the company. And now, I mean, we have found a way to valorize this kind of a sustainable approach in the reducing the cost of debt, increasing the number of shareholders, de-risking activities, and so on. So there is a lot of value behind, a sustainable approach. I like very much the concept that you made before regarding the culture. It's a matter of culture for the people that work in the company and the company itself to realize that sustainability is strategy, is value, is the future for the company at the present. And that's basically what is happening, at least in Enel Green Power, but it's happening in many companies in the wind sector.
No, that's great. And last but not least, Otto.
Yeah, thank you. So Modvion is not an old company. When we started out 6 years ago, wind power was just the image of a wind power tower was the icon of sustainability. So bringing forward that we wanted to make it more sustainable was a bit too much to people even. Yeah. But currently there's a lot of wood construction brought forward, so it's easier for people to see now. And I think when we speak about net zero wind power installations, it's really exciting. Just a few examples of work that we do currently. We spoke about circularity previously. We're working with architectural firms that want to reuse our towers after their lifetime, which is quite good stamina, since they have to wait for 30 years to use the materials, but it's good of them still. We're looking into the glues that we use, so that they don't have to be fossil-based. They can use lignin from wood in the glues to manufacture them. So exciting projects.
Absolutely, and it's not necessarily short timelines we're looking at either. I mean, if you look at the definition of sustainability, it's ensuring that future generations have access to stuff. So we're not necessarily going to see the fruits of our labour, but it's great to know you're part of a bigger picture and part of solving a bigger problem. And I'll share my own little anecdote of one of the tasks related to sustainability that I've experienced in my very short career, and that is when I was at school and I was a sustainability monitor, which obviously is a bit broad. What do you do? My job was to take out the recycling bins on a Friday afternoon after school. So, like your taxi story, it's not always glamorous, but it's part of the bigger solution. And on that note, I'll leave that story there. Thank you so much to our lovely panelists. You've been great, and it's been really great to get into this conversation and just start to scratch the surface. I mean, we know there's way more to this conversation. I'm sure we could do with another hour or so, but on that note, I'd like to just allow the audience to give you a round of applause. You've been great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And so now I'd like to welcome any questions from anyone who would like to ask. There will be a roving mic, so if you just raise your hand, say your name and your organisation, and we'd be delighted to answer your questions.
Son, yeah. Hi, Jonathan Feddersen from Copenhagen Business School. So a little bit industry outsider, but I'm working on a research project together with Ørsted on sustainability within your industry. And I've got two questions. It's a little bit sad that the panelists of the prior panel have left, right? Because I don't know whether you were there already. I think it was your head of procurement,
Yes.
strategic procurement, and a consultant. And we're in a situation where your industry is under extreme cost and supply chain pressure. And had we asked your head of strategic procurement, he wouldn't have been so optimistic about making all those investments into a more sustainable supply chain at the current point in time. So how do you see working for sustainability, working for more sustainable wind turbines in particular, in this particular historic situation? And will it jeopardize your efforts while we go along because those resources are simply not there? I mean, you just laid off close to 3,000 people, right? So let's put things into perspective. That's the first point, and I'd love to hear some comments on that. Second point, I mean, I've been more narrowly focusing on decarbonization of the supply chain and climate targets. How about biodiversity, which is more and more on the horizon? Just like to get your comments, particularly the question as to which extent biodiversity is only an issue for developers, or how you see that as turbine manufacturers to be also something to be handled on your plate. Thank you.
I could say something for the first question.
Go for it, go for it, yeah.
I think Iskander also made that point, because we really need to say we are currently in a very bad situation as the OEMs. Times are very, very difficult. And we have a huge capacity challenge for the future ahead of us, and we want to have capacity increases where we see at the end sustainable supply chains also coming up. And one point Iskander was mentioning is that sustainability needs to be reflected in the auction design so that it can be valued. And this needs to happen very, very fast, because then we can drive sustainable investments. So if I would be now a steel maker, it will be very difficult for me. Do I invest now in a green steel plant? Will you then pay already the price needed for it? Or will I wait 5 years until I do it, and then the prices will be on a level I can earn back my investment? I will not invest in an old traditional steel mill yet, because then I will have a stranded asset in a few years. So it's really important for us, and that's why we urge the policymakers as well, if you refer to our white paper that just came out early this week, to take these actions and consider also the qualitative criteria to drive sustainable supply chain ramp up in Europe.
That's great. Is there any more interventions from anyone else on those questions?
Otherwise, I can pick the second one.
Yeah, or we can
If
move on. Is
if
there
you
any
want,
other
I mean-
questions from the audience?
I mean, you're totally right. I mean, regarding biodiversity, when I mentioned the stakeholders' expectation is growing. One of the expectations stakeholders about biodiversity that affects the development, the construction, the operation of a power plant, and of course the supply chain as well. But I think that this is one of the topic where the industry has to improve a lot. Because in the design, also during the development, especially, we need to go more deeper into the biodiversity protection and also to find also new innovative solutions during operation for protecting the birds and all the fauna that is might be affected by the operation of the plant. And I think that the solutions are available and can be applied. Again, it's just a matter of speeding up this process. That at the moment, as was said before, it's not probably the right moment for applying too many things or to increase the costs. But in my view, this is just a temporary problem, because in the medium term and long term, it won't be accepted, a plant, if the plant won't be sustainable. And that's what we are discovering, especially in developed countries. The acceptance of the plants in the territories is becoming more difficult. And this reflects to the permitting processes that I guess this week has been discussed in other meetings. So sustainability can be an enabler of the development. And biodiversity, more and more, has to be at the center of the development and design of the turbine.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add just a small comment towards the myth that sustainability always needs to be more expensive or more cost intense than not acting in a sustainable way. On a very, very concrete example, if we take, for example, the refurbishment of major components. So it's much cheaper to do that, and it's also way less CO2 intense. So it's up to us, I think, to find those niches and to be innovative and to take the risks, because it doesn't necessarily need to be that sustainability is always. In the long run, of course, never or hardly. You're talking short term, of course, or mostly. That's mostly the discussion. Yeah, sure. Yes, yeah, just wanted to add that there's also areas where it goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. That's great. That was a really good question. That got a lot of response from our panelists. And I believe we are at time. So thank you again for being a really great audience. It was great to have questions. And it's great to see a crowd on a Friday afternoon. So thank you very much for that. And I wish you all a very happy weekend and a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thanks.